Well, Rebecca mentioned that leaders' debate in Edinburgh last night. It was stormy and sometimes bad-tempered, but it was a member of the public, not a politician, who stole the show. The First Minister was taken to task by a nurse over the continuing pay gap, which she says has driven her and her colleagues to use food banks. It caused a storm on social media, with some doubting her claims. So are nurses really using food banks? Well, our health and social care correspondent Shelley Joffrey has been finding out.
I'm a nurse who I can't manage on the salary I have. I have to go to food banks.
The First Minister's discomfort was clear when Claire Austin mentioned food banks and nursing in the same breath.
How many years have we had 1%?
I accept that.
How many? Tell me how many.
Too many. I accept
How many?
that. We've had it since about 2008.
Claire Austin has been the target of some pretty awful social media abuse overnight. When I spoke to her today, she was in tears. She says she was referred to a food bank twice in 5 years in very specific circumstances when she was, as she says, up against the wall. But just how common is her story?
A fully qualified nurse in Scotland starts on just over £22,000. That's £312 higher than south of the border. A healthcare support worker starts on just over £16,000, nearly £900 more than in England. The minimum income required for a single person to get by is just over £17,000, according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. So it's easy to see how some may be struggling. The Royal College of Nursing in Scotland can't point to any specific cases of nurses using food banks, but around 40 nurses have received money from their hardship fund last year.
Our members are telling us increasingly that they are struggling to make ends meet. The fact of the matter is that each year for the last 4 or 5 years, nurses have been affected a pay cut because inflation has sat above the rate that they have been given in terms of increase. So year on year they're earning less and it's becoming more difficult to make ends meet.
The Trussell Trust runs more food banks than anyone in Scotland, with 145,000 referrals last year. Its chair told me they haven't heard of any nurses using their food banks, but they are dealing with a growing number of people who are working on low incomes.
You have no idea how demoralising it is to work within the NHS.
Claire Austin says in spite of the backlash, she's heartened to hear the Scottish Government is offering to work with unions on pay. Shelley Joffrey, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Well, our political editor Brian Taylor joins us now. Brian, the First Minister has had to apologise for this nurses' row. Tell us what happened.
I mean, as these things tend to do, there's been something of a stooshy on social media, with some questioning the relative extent of Ms Austin's penury and others suggesting and noting the fact that an SNP candidate had to apologise for wrongly suggesting that Ms Austin was married to a Conservative councillor. So these things have buzzed back and forward, again, as I stress, as they tend to do. In the middle of it somewhere, there is a genuine policy question, which, to be clear, is devolved to Scotland and not directly the responsibility of MPs. And that question is whether there should be a continuing pay cap for nurses and others in the health service. You have those on the left criticising the SNP approach in Scotland. The SNP answer is to say that they have endorsed, they have implemented UK-wide pay recommendations that has resulted in nurses in Scotland being paid more than those in England. And Nicola Sturgeon is also suggesting that with inflation beginning to edge up, now might well be the time to alter that argument and to alter the imposition of a pay cap.
And tomorrow, Brian, the focus moves to the SNP as the party launches its manifesto.
Yeah, I mean, if pay is about arithmetic and politics is often about arithmetic because it's about spending promises and tax promises, this election in Scotland feels to me like geometry. You have the competing parties talking about the strategy and the tactics they would take. You have a battle as to who is best placed to counter the Conservatives at Westminster, and you have a battle as to who is best placed to challenge the SNP in Scotland.
Thank you very much, Brian.